one's out. If you were at the welcome lunch or you received a souvenir doll, you've already heard a little bit about Dianna's beginnings in brenda ornaments. But let's take you back to where it all began. Picture it. Christmas, 1975. No moving. Come on now. Why isn't it moving? There we go. Picture it. Christmas, 1975-ish. South suburbs of Chicago. Dianna had come for a visit with her family, and as my mother usually did, she had a craft project planned. She had found a recipe in one of her women's magazines for a dough that was made with salt, flour, and water, and became hard when it was baked at a low temperature. And the project that the magazine had was a poinsettia wreath where you roll out the dough and cut all the leaves and then arrange them around the base to make a poinsettia wreath. Similar in concept to these. Dianna was intrigued by the dough. It was cheap, easy to make, it had readily available materials, but she wasn't really the type to do cookie cut or anything. So she took the dough and she began playing with it, sculpting with it, painting with it, and doing all the things Dianna did. And one of the first things she made is this set of holly hobbies. And these hung in my mom's kitchen till 2008 when we sold the house. And now they hang in the Mercantile in the coffee shop that is run by Leela and her two daughters. And after the holly hobby, and she began making Christmas ornaments. And she started at first with very typical designs, Santa Claus, reindeer, etc. But the possibilities were endless. As she did throughout her career, she continued to hone her skills and perfect her techniques. She experimented with the recipe and with the baking process to keep the ornaments from cracking during the baking. And she perfected her painting techniques. As you can see, these are some of her earliest ornaments. And here's some of her later ones. Oops, sorry. You can see from these two Santas how her sculpting went from big and clunky to much more refined designs, and her painting went from opaque colors to using washes to create depth. And her faces became much more detailed and showed much more expression. These were two of my personal favorites, and the little jazz dancer was our inspiration for the souvenir doll. I always loved the way she used the shading and the hash marks to convey the fishnet tights. It was such a simple thing, but it was so effective. And who doesn't love ET?
That's so cute.
Dianna and Randy turned their ornament workshop into a cottage industry and earned enough dough to buy their property in Missouri. But the heat and humidity in Missouri combined with the salt corroded the wire that they used for the hooks on the ornaments. So she began to look for more permanent and stable materials to use and eventually began working in porcelain.
Okay, and I'm Leela, and I'm going to talk about the next era, which was her began her porcelain doll career. So here is a sample of the three distinct eras of Mom's work in porcelain. Starting with Lucky, who represents her earliest sculpts that she created in the late 1970s. She began with sculpting heads for other companies to produce limited editions of porcelain dolls. Then we have Carrie, who represents the work she began in the early 1980s of creating her own limited editions, where she not only sculpted the head, hands, and feet, but also designed and handcrafted the armature, the outfit, shoes and accessories of each doll in each edition. And lastly, Bonnie, representing the Expressions era, which began in the early 90s. Here she sculpted the head and body parts and designed the outfits of the first prototype for the mold business. Such a vast difference in the intricate details of her sculpting between the three different eras. Oh. Okay. Mom created these early sculpts while we were living our city life in Peoria, but we had already made several visits to the farm where we would soon move, and as you can tell by these characters, the dream of country life had already been born. Sorry, I'm not too tech savvy. Okay. One of the distinct differences in this era of her doll designs and all her future work is the glass eyes. She used glass eyes in the beginning just because that is what others were doing, and it had not yet occurred to her to do anything else until one day a friend said to her, "You're an artist, why don't you paint the eyes?" So that was the aha moment that compelled her to begin painting the eyes in her Wildflower series, which she began creating soon after we moved to the farm. I was 8 when we made the move, and I distinctly remember the drastic change in our life as we went from a fairly large house in a neighborhood to a very small double-wide trailer that Dad made into a home by replacing the metal siding with cedar shingles and building a foundation by hand from rock gathered from the creek. They weren't too particular on landscaping, as you can see by the tall grass and the rocky hillside. But to Mom and Dad, owning their own piece of land, debt-free, and having their own cottage industry was true freedom. The Wildflower series of dolls was such an integral part of this new freedom they found in the country. She had an unending supply of inspiration among the children that lived and played there.
So the Wildflowers series basically spanned the 80s, and the beginning of the 90s marked a major transition for Mom's career. She and Dad bought a giant old historic building in the small town nearby our home, the Jamestown Mercantile, where they started Dianna Effner's Porcelain Dolls and Expressions Mold Company. And sometime before all this happened, Mom had met a doll artist named Martha Hand at one of the doll shows that she attended and asked Martha to critique her dolls. Martha's main critique was that the faces of Mom's dolls were too flat. And you can see in this picture that even though her Wildflowers dolls had a lot of character that was created with the paint, the sculpt itself was kind of flat, which is not surprising considering that Mom had been doing the somewhat flat-shaped ornaments for so long before she started making the dolls, and had relied mainly on the paint for the detail and depth. But always enjoying a new challenge, after receiving Martha Hand's advice, Mom delved into a more realistic sculpting style and in a much larger size that allowed her to capture more detail. She sculpted 2 dolls for a mold company called the Ultimate Collection, Hillary and Willow. And here you can see with the Willow doll, the depth that she was able to achieve and the realism. And she looked just like Willow, as you can see here in this photo. Oops, I went too far. Okay. So Mom's first sculpt for the Expressions Mold Company was Aaron, and there I am holding him. He was another neighbor on the farm. It's stuck on backwards. Oh, I see now. Okay, so the second sculpt of Mom's, this is my all-time favorite, so I had to include it. This was the second one she did for Expressions. The Emily doll, I'm sure a lot of you know her. And And I remember when Mom was working on this doll, this sculpt, I came up upon her and I said, "Who's that?" And Mom playfully responded, "Nobody." And then she proceeded to recite a poem by Emily Dickinson that went, "I'm nobody, who are you? Are you nobody too? Then there's a pair of us, don't tell. They've advertised, you know. How dreary to be somebody. How public, like a frog. To tell one's name the livelong June to an admiring fog." So even though Emily wasn't a portrait of anyone, to me she was a kind of character self-portrait of Mom, because this was just so much like her. She had so much inner motivation without it having anything to do with recognition or fame. Here's Jeannie, made after Kayla, that's Leela's oldest daughter, Mom's first grandchild. And Mom had made several sculpts of Kayla, including the Kayla and the Jenny dolls. But I wanted to share this one in particular because it showcases how, by this time, that Mom had become even more skilled as a sculptor. To be able to achieve this unique expression, toothy smile, I think for someone who hadn't achieved this level of skill, attempting this expression, it might easily turn out kind of scary. But it turned out really cute, and I'm sure provided a lot of opportunities for playful characters by the doll makers who used this mold. There she is, that's the gesture. I love that one too. Bonnie was sculpted after Mom's second granddaughter, Chelsea, also Leela's second daughter, and Mom loved Chelsea's cute bottom teeth smile and captured it perfectly. And here she is, the Bonnie doll as Chelsea herself. And it was a special memory of a performance we did at a banquet just like this one. With Mom, me, Kayla, Chelsea, and our cousin Miranda, Casey and Troy's daughter, dancing to the Ugly Bug Ball. Mom made those costumes, of course, all of them. And I remember when Mom was working on the April doll back around 2004. The mold industry had dwindled quite a bit, and she wanted to make doll making more accessible to people who didn't have a kiln. And she did a lot of experimenting with acrylic paints right on the finished porcelain and created a kit out of the April doll that people could paint directly on. So this was likely part of what led to the Little Darling series. It was around this time that she started working with the Liani Company, which had the ability to create the vinyl dolls. And it was also around that time that Mom created the Doll Dreamers Guild, inviting doll artists to study her eye painting technique, and upon approval become exclusively certified artists of the Little Darlings. This included Jerry Uribe, who painted the souvenir dolls tonight. Jerry was Mom's assistant for over 40 years, and for many of those years, in the beginning, all she did was things like cleaning the porcelain. And eventually, she started painting limited editions of Mom's porcelain dolls. And then once the vinyl darlings were created, Jerry had gone from being an assistant to becoming a doll maker to becoming a doll artist, creating her own unique characters with the vinyl dolls, which was really what Mom envisioned for the Little Darlings. In a bit, we'll show some examples by the guild members, but I'll first show a few that Mom painted. I think she really wanted to show with these pictures, which I found on her computer, what the possibilities were with these dolls. While the vinyl is a bit limiting compared to porcelain in terms of showing the detail with the sculpt, she called upon her painting skills to create the detail, depth, and uniqueness of each doll. So this is the Little Darling number 1, and there's 5 different versions here of the same sculpt, but they each look so unique. And here's the number 2, which was perfect for creating an Asian doll. But here you can see that with paint, the sculpt had a lot of other possibilities, has a lot of other possibilities as well. Here's number 3. Again, such a vast variety between these 3 different ones. And here's the next one. Here's one she did that was obviously painted after my brother's daughter, Raquel. Mom was fascinated with Raquel's sweet upturned eyebrows. And she was showing here how artists could create portraits with these dolls as well. The number 4 darling was kind of following the trend of unusually large eyes, but while maintaining Mom's signature innocent expression. Again, these 4 examples demonstrate the versatility one can achieve with skilled painting. So in the examples we are about to show, in the examples we're about to show by the guild members of the newest little darling, the number 5, I am blown away by the variety and uniqueness of each artist's little darlings. They are all a wonderful testament to Mom's vision, a dream come true.
So we're the caretakers of the legacy, but we really couldn't do it without our guild members. When we released the number 5 this year, we invited the guild members to each make one so that we could showcase how different the number 5 could look from different artists, and they all did a fabulous job. We just want to share those with you. April's and Ashley's and Jerry's, and Helen's and Jana's and Joyce, Lana's, Laura's, Leanne's, Linda's and Magali's, and Nellie and Pat. And Gwen, I think, had some family things going on at that time and didn't have the time to do one for us, but we want to recognize Gwen because she is still a valuable member of the guild. And also, a huge thank you to Nellie Valentino, our number 5s for the convention. She was a tremendous help putting the souvenir doll costume together, and of course creating the beautiful costume on the centerpiece doll that you see in front of you. This was a jazz era inspired outfit. Again, it was painted by Jerry Uribe, and the dresses were produced by Nellie's sister, Maritza. I believe. With that, we would like to thank the Dianna Effner Doll Dreamers Guild members, all the collectors, and Martin Darrell's Collectors Convention for helping us keep the legacy alive.
I want to say a huge thank you to my patrons from Patreon: Lindsay S., Leah W., Doreen Z., Janice H., Mercedes W., Cindy K., Bear Sunflower, Diane B., Kelly L., Shorna R., Stephanie W., Shalane C., Penny P., Louisa's Knickknacks, Marty G., Lynn P., Cindy L., and Sabrina A. Your support means so much to me and helps me continue bringing you great dolly content. For more information on how you can become a supporter of this channel, please see the notes in the video description. Thank you.